the midpoint. So 50% of the kids scored the score that's reported here up to the 75th. And then it says 25 to 50. So if you can, thank you. You can imagine, I need my hands to talk here. You've got from 0 to 100 here. And you're going to cut that 100 kids, especially at Narragansett, if you're thinking 100. You're going to say, all right, the top 25 kids scored between, at Narragansett in math, from 610 to 800. And that same year at North Kingstown, the top 25% of the kids in math scored between 600 and 800. So there's a difference of 10 points there. That's the only instance where Narragansett's cut score was higher than North Kingstown. If we're looking across in math, we see that every year at North Kingstown, the top 25% of the kids scored a minimum of 600 and somewhere between 600 and 800. It dropped slightly, 10 points, 20 points actually, from 610 to 590 for the top 25% of the test takers at Narragansett. Then if you look at, all right, well, what about the top half? That's what this chart is showing, the 50th percentile. The top half scored from 540 to just under that, it would be to 600. And then the next 25% down was between 450 to 530. So it's giving you by 25% increments the range of scores that that the kids achieved. I think the difference, overall, the scores are higher at North Kingstown High School than they are at Narragansett. There are some places where we thought that this was pretty significant, and especially in writing. If you look at this last year's seniors, the top 25% of test takers at Narragansett went from 560 on upward to 800, but 560 was below the state average for that particular cutoff. Whereas North Kingstown's cutoff for the 75th percentile was at 600. There's a 40-point difference there, and we found that to be pretty significant. The other thing that we wanted to see was, what about the highest achieving students? Our kids are high achievers, and you'll see when Kathy starts talking about the advanced placement courses, how many they take and how well they do. They're well prepared when they go on to high school, and they do very well. So let's look at how many kids, or the percent of students in these same categories over 3 years that score between 700 and 800. That's pretty high achievement. And in every case, the percentages, and you see I have the percent, and then in parentheses is the number of students. So the percent really gives us the comparison. In mathematics, the percents were the same in 06-07 for both schools at 6% of the students scored from 700 to 800. The next year they were both at 3%. This last senior class, 2% at Narragansett and 5% at North Kingstown. The next category down, being 600 to 690, again, is in that top 25% range. And the percentages are higher 3 years ago at Narragansett, but if we look at this last year's senior class, overall they are much higher, no, I won't say much higher, they are higher at North Kingstown. Looking at the reading scores, This last year, there were no students at Narragansett scoring 700 to 800. There were 5% of the class at North Kingstown who scored in that range. And if you're just looking again at last year's senior class, you go down to the next range, there were 17% at Narragansett, adding those two. So who's, how many kids, percent of kids scored between 600 and 800 would have been 17% overall at Narragansett and 29% at North Kingstown. The writing, there have been very few students at Narragansett for the past 3 years. In fact, there was one in 06-07, one student in 07-08, and no students in 08-09 who scored 700 to 800 in writing. The percents aren't high at North Kingstown, but their 4% was 10 students, 4% another 10, 6%, 15 students who scored in writing in that 700 to 800 category. Overall, the scores at the top are more students at North Kingstown are scoring in the highest ranges than at Narragansett. Another thing that we looked at is the SAT subject test. When I took these tests, they were called the SAT achievement tests. You all may have taken some of these. They're elective, and they're given in specific subject areas, and it is an achievement test in a particular area. There are some very selective colleges that require that students take these. It's usually your highest performing students that will elect to take them. Students at both schools in the senior classes have taken one or more SAT subject tests. However, the numbers were so small that the SAT report did not report them. So it doesn't allow people to match up in the report the student to the score because there were fewer than 5 in a particular subject area. There's probably 20 to 25 different subject areas that they could take the test. But they're taking them in both schools, which is a good indication of those kids that want to reach high as they go on to college. So overall, for the past 3 years, the SAT test takers from North Kingstown scored higher than those students from Narragansett High School. Bucky?
Yeah, hi, Bucky Brennan, 38 Narragansett Avenue. One thing we know is that our students are about 20% of the attendees at the high school. Typically, since I've been looking at school committee information, it seems that on average, year to year, our students are about 30 to somewhere higher than that, plus in the top 10 of all the students in the school. We've had students that have been valedictorian and salutatorian in the same year, and so I think you might want to look at a piece of data that you're not looking at, which is take the Jamestown students out of the mix at NK and see what it does to their score, and add them to Narragansett and see what it does to their score. Because I think we strongly help out NK with the kneecaps and the SAT data that you were just talking to. So I think that would be an important thing for you to look at to see what that does.
But remember that the way that our kids score is based on the instruction. So they are scoring what they're scoring because of the instruction that they're receiving.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think there's also, and it may sound elitist, but there's a socioeconomic difference that we bring out of the gate that, helps us to attain the levels that we do. I don't think that it just speaks to the, what NK or Narragansett will bring to our kids. I think we add there, and I think you should look at that because it's not really apples to apples, because if you took us out of those numbers, what would it look like? And so,
unfortunately, we would have liked to do that, but the way the reports are constructed, we are not able to identify students and pull our own students' scores out to be able to take a look at them. Because there were a number of times we said, well, that's fine, but what about our kids in this mix, and how are they doing? Even like